Hello and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered disclosure related to nursing and healthcare. My name is Sarah.
And my name is Amie.
And we are your podcast hosts. Today we're going to be talking about nurse-on-nurse crime, so let's get into it.
Yeah.
So Amie, tell me how your weekend was. What have you been up to?
Well, actually my weekend was very low-key, kind of boring to be honest. I think all I did was paint my baseboards. So my husband went out and bought some white paint and I went to town sanding and painting my baseboards. I know, not very fun.
Well, what color
dry,
did you paint it? What do you have an official shade of paint that you used?
We just kept them white. Like I've seen a variety of different things being done in other people's homes and I'm not very, elaborate that way. So we really just wanted to get the dings and dangs from our kids out of the wall and the scuff marks from them kicking their boots off. So it's just a simple, brilliant white. So it looks all fresh. It looks like it's brand new in there and I'm sure that'll last up until they need to go back to school.
Oh, nice.
What about yourself? How was your weekend?
We had my in-laws over all day yesterday, so that was okay. I feel like I had to actually be a nurse yesterday, though, because my mother-in-law tripped outside of our house, and she fell.
Oh, no. Is she okay?
And she's okay, but she actually scraped her cheek, and she bruised her knee pretty bad. So they come into the house, and she's, like, all scuffed up, and I'm like, oh, my God. And then my husband was like, can you just take care of her? So I got her an ice pack and I dried off her face. And then I got my polysporin and my Band-Aids. And then I had like dressed it and I'm like, I'm trying to keep it sterile technique. And then I also sent her home with a little kit of polysporin and Q-tips and 2 different kinds of Band-Aids. So
that is completely hilarious because I bet you if there was anybody else other than a nurse there, they would ask anybody to do that. Like anybody would be the helper. But because you're a nurse, you are the first person that has to become that caregiver, right? It's just because it happens in my family too. Like I'll get that call about like, oh, can you tell me a little bit about the stomach issue that I'm having? And I'm like, I know nothing about that. Like I can't help you. But I guess as nurses, we get this whole, like, we know everything. We should know everything. We should be able to heal everybody. So it's kind of it comes with the territory, I guess.
Yeah, and especially if there's no doctor in your family, you are just the go-to person for anything medical or health related.
Yep.
Even if you explain that you really don't know much about it and you haven't studied that subject since nursing school.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't get it. We do everything, supposedly.
And then I do have a funny story from today. So my kids were jumping on the couch as they are not supposed to. And then all of a sudden my son said that my daughter had spit up on the couch. Or he said something came out of her mouth. And then we look and we see this stain on the couch. But then the funny part is we saw it on his hair. It was right on top of his head. Almost as though a bird had pooped right onto the top of his head. But he didn't know it was there. So then I just got a wipe and I was wiping it out of his hair. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, nothing. Just want to clean your hair a bit. And then I said something to my husband about how she puked in his hair. And then he said, what's puke? Because I guess he knows it as spit up or something else. And we're just like, nothing. Don't worry about it. And we didn't want to we didn't want to give him a whole bath because we had just given him a bath, I think, an hour before this happened.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
That's the life with kids. Oh my god. We could do whole episodes on just like being nurses with kids and dealing with the craziness that we have to deal with, but we won't do that today.
No.
That's great. So today we're going to talk about, like we said, nurse-on-nurse crime, because it is that. I don't know. I do know they do call it nursing lateral violence or workplace violence, workplace bullying, harassment. We'll kind of get into talking about the definitions. But I think we're going to kind of do almost like a 3-part series. I think there's so much to talk about in terms of like what does it look like? So I think this episode we're really going to try to hit that theoretical piece. So what does it look like? What can it appear like? We'll hit on some definitions and kind of what are the stats in terms of lateral nursing violence, and how does it actually affect yourself or staffing levels or even patients, or does it affect them? And like, do we even hear or learn about this?
Yeah, and I think we just want to break it down, right? Because we talk about all the time how nurses eat their young, but there's actually different definitions at play here. So the first one is bullying. The
Right.
second topic we wanted to just talk about is lateral violence. So violence from peers. So someone at the same level as you or same position as you in your workplace. And the third is harassment. So these are three different terms that mean
Right.
different things. And we just wanted to clarify what each of them are and just go into some more uh, theoretical things that are happening with those different issues.
Yeah, for sure.
And one thing I wanted to say is when I was looking up bullying, it really centered around bullying in schools. But as we know,
Right.
bullying can occur at any stage of life. It's not just limited to people of school age, but of course, there's a big emphasis on that, which I think is important. But bullies that are bullies in school, they grow up to be bullies as well in the workplace.
Yep.
Um, and so, technically, for an act to be considered bullying, it has to meet certain criteria. So, there has to be the hostile intent, there has to be an imbalance of power, meaning that the person that's doing the bullying feels more powerful for having bullied the victim. Um, so, repetition and distress, and also provocation. So, we know that there are many different ways that this can look.
Right. And I mean, another one of the definitions that we kind of can talk about is incivility, right? So really that would be how that's defined is it's that mistreatment that can be, it's not necessarily bullying per se, but it can be like eye rolling or disrespect or gossiping or just that general unfriendliness, that nurse that just will always rub you the wrong way and they'll never say hi to you. That would be more like incivility. They don't consider it bullying, but it's just not a nice feeling. But it still is really something that's not a part of the job.
Yeah, and a lot of that is non-verbal, right? So it's not that they've said anything even, but just giving you a really unfriendly look or resting bitch face
Yeah.
can be enough to make you feel uncomfortable. Um, and the other thing that I just wanted to touch on was lateral violence, right?
Yep.
So there's the definition of lateral violence, which is someone that's at the same level as you that is trying to either openly or sort of covertly do things that make you feel uncomfortable. This could be physical or this could be verbal, emotional. And then the third definition I wanted to touch on is harassment. So harassment is actually a form of discrimination. So it could be any unwanted physical or verbal behavior that offends or humiliates you. Generally, it's something that persists over time, but it could also be a serious one-time incident.
Right.
Um, so if someone, for example, makes unwelcome remarks or jokes about your race, religion, sex, age, or any disability that you have, if they threaten or intimidate you based on these criteria, or if they make unwelcome physical contact with you, such as touching, patting, or pinching. So that's a definition of harassment.
And like, to me, harassment is something like those terms, harassment, bullying. I feel that they're much more concrete definitions in terms of really understanding what's happening in those situations where lateral nursing violence or lateral nursing bullying is much more insidious, and there's these low lying kind of tensions that happen, and it almost makes you kind of second guess yourself. You're like, is this really happening to me? Like, did that person really treat me this way, or like, am I actually really being singled out, or is it all in my mind? And this is how I feel like lateral nursing violence kind of really messes with a person. And they do, kind of talk about it as like it's so ubiquitous in nursing. It happens. It's not supposed to be a rite of passage, but it almost comes off like it's supposed like it is, but it really isn't. It's not an acceptable behavior by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and I've said this before. I think things are changing for the better, but I think they're changing very slowly, and I don't know if that's enough. I also know that in nursing school, they don't touch on this topic at all, so you're really unprepared for what's to come,
Right.
other than what you hear from other people, just in talking with them. But there really is nothing concrete that you learn in nursing school that's going to prepare you for this.
No, and like that article that we read from Johns Hopkins University, they kind of talked about like, oh, the first time this nurse had actually experienced lateral nursing violence was when she kind of her first shift on the job, when a nurse was like, oh, just to let you know, like older nurses eat their young. It's just something to be expected. And the thing is, I kind of found that statement really, it is somewhat true, but the thing is, it's not even just older nurses that do it. Younger nurses do it as well. Like, it's almost like, well, now you're the newest in line, so now I can do that to you. So I don't think it necessarily is always the older nurses, because I think that's a false perception.
Yeah, and I think their justification for acting the way they do is not right either, because a lot of them will say, well, this is how I was treated when I started, so it was hard for me, it's going to be hard for you. But that really doesn't help anyone.
No.
It doesn't help anyone function better as a team. It doesn't help with the relationship. It's just not a good way to start off.
Right, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, they're set in their ways. That's just how she is. She's grumpy, or he's grumpy with everybody, and I think that's bullshit too. Like, I think if you have a chip on your shoulder, then maybe you're not in the right profession. And I think again, through our podcast series, we'll talk about one, our own experiences, and then two, how to combat and deal with it, and the mental health aspect. But it really, like, for anybody to be like, oh, that's just the way it is, it's definitely not status quo, and it's not something to be accepted.
Yeah, and I think even when you and I were doing research for this podcast, we found not a lot of concrete research out there, and we found statistics that said anywhere between 46 to 100% of nurses experience lateral violence. But that's such a big range.
Crazy.
It doesn't tell you much of anything at all, really.
No, so essentially it says every single nurse, or 1 in 2, experience lateral nursing violence. Like, to me, that is, I think if we were looking at that from like a medical statistics, we think that was like hugely alarming. We'd be like, oh, there's huge confidence intervals that would say that, this actually requires significant attention. But I don't think it actually gets the attention that it's warranted at all.
No, not at all. And we did find a lot of research on patient violence, so violence from patients towards nurses. And I do think that's very important. But when you're working on the unit and you don't feel the support of your fellow nurses, or you're feeling ganged up on by everyone, that can have just as much of an effect, if not more, than a patient that's violent towards you.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and I think we're really just left to fend for ourselves. So if we don't have the tools to, first of all, recognize and respond to it, then I don't know how anybody would sort of move forward with the resolution of lateral violence.
Right. And I mean, I think in terms of like just even circling back in terms of how it affects nurses, like I feel like obviously it's usually like a newer graduates are more vulnerable to becoming victims of this type of aggression. I think some of the stats talked about higher absenteeism, reduced work-life balance, reduced work satisfaction. Of course, increased stress levels, and then obviously the desire to leave the job, so attrition, right? So working as an educator or working in those roles where we've seen people kind of come in and leave, you can definitely tell. We know, like, that person has felt not supported. And you usually get that on your exit interviews too, hearing like, I wasn't supported by the staff, or it kind of comes out during that exit interview to say that, hey, I actually had a poor working experience due to other staff members here. And I think that if it's costing, on average, I think I saw a stat where it says on average it costs hospitals anywhere between 37,000 upwards to 60,000 just for attrition. I think that is a huge. I think it's a huge cost expenditure. If you're hiring someone and they're not staying even 3 months because they're not happy because other staff members are bullying them or treating them very poorly. I think, to me, it warrants more attention.
Yeah, and the comment that you made about the exit interview and giving the reason for leaving, I feel like not everyone would give the real reason.
Right.
So
That's true.
we're talking about only the people that actually were honest enough to say why they were leaving, but there could be any number of people that would just find a more PC answer. So saying they found a job closer to home, or they found a job with better hours or better schedule.
Right.
And underlying that issue could actually be the workplace culture and the lateral violence they experience.
Yeah, and maybe they feel like saying it out loud is also part of the problem. Like, I think, like, just where we're saying, like, nurses don't really talk about their issues. We tend to internalize a lot of things that are happening to us, and specifically probably something like lateral nursing violence. You don't want to speak ill of your coworkers, even if it is them that are causing you, sleepless nights or crying on your shift. But, like, I think it's hugely important to speak up and to say something about it. And I completely understand that maybe at that exit interview, they feel that that's probably not the time, but I think better late than never, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that even for the nurses that don't end up leaving, they may end up calling in sick because they don't want to work with a specific person,
Right.
or they end up switching their shifts a lot because they want to be on the opposite schedule to the person they're trying to avoid.
Right.
So I've seen that happen in my practice. And, it's a lot of extra work, administrative work, time mentally that you're spending worrying about this when you could be looking after your patients. And so there's a big cost associated with that too.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, like, there's got to be some effects towards patients as well. Like, if you're so worried about what your colleagues thinking, I'm sure that if they did some type of studies, and this is where I think it'd be interesting to know, like, what's the correlation in error where teams aren't working well together, or someone is ostracized, or they don't feel confident to ask a question because they feel that they might get that eye rolling, or they get a smart ass type of response. I can only imagine that the level of errors, or the likelihood for error, would increase, especially if you don't feel that you're confident to speak to another member of your team.
Or even worse, to make an error and not report it because you're worried about the retaliation that might come from your team.
That's absolutely horrifying, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it sounds like it affects nursing, it affects the individual themselves, it affects, obviously, staffing levels, and then invariably it boils down to affecting the patients. And at the end of the day, I know that we as nurses, the reason we get into these professions is to help others. But if we're not feeling supported, and we feel that we can't do the right thing, and we're always making mistakes, or someone's going to be judging us, then I think it trickles down into that error that comes down to the patient. So I think that to me sounds like something that is worth the time to talk about, to start looking at problem solving and solutions.
Yeah, and I think we can also talk about, at least from my experience, there are certain times where people do pull together. So, for example, when there's an emergency or a code, the team pulls together, they get the job done, but then what happens day to day? So when there isn't a code situation, are we still feeling as supported? Are we promoting a culture of learning? And the answer might be no. And during these high stress situations, maybe that's the only time that the team actually functions as a cohesive unit. I've seen that happen before, where we actually looked at incident reports and we looked at the acuity of the unit. And the surprising thing that we found is that most of the incident reports were during times where the unit was not busy. So people were just sort of, I'm not really sure what was happening, but just on a day-to-day, everyday baseline, they just weren't functioning well as a team.
Right. That's crazy. That's really interesting. Like, I mean, I just feel like there's just not enough data out there and not enough voices talking about this issue. And I think I would love to be the first person, like, hey, if somebody wants to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, come do some research at our center and see what's happening here. I'd be more than happy to. I just think we need to have more of a conversation, and I think we just need to pull it out and put it to the forefront, because I know we're not going to talk about it today, but in terms of our own experiences, like I think we need to dispel the myth that it's okay and really let people know that it's not fucking okay. It's not okay by any stretch of the imagination. So
well said. And I have to say, if someone is a new grad or still in school, they may honestly feel like they're the problem. And I don't want people to feel that way, because that is not the case. But I feel like when you're new and you're not confident, the first person you're going to blame is yourself,
right,
for the way that this person is treating you. But really, a lot of the time it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with that person.
Yep.
And they need to be told that what they're doing is not right, and there needs to be some kind of follow through. There needs to be some kind of consequences for that person that's behaving badly.
And with you saying that in terms of talking about students too, like we talk a lot about like new hires and new grads, but students get it too, right? Like I remember even in some of our roles seeing some students kind of coming in and they get it too, and they might get it from not only the person that they're preceptoring with, but they get it weirdly from their school. And it's like, okay, well, this is supposed to be a supportive learning environment. And I think that even circling it full back to talking about it at the school and educational level to say, hey, this is something that happens, but let's talk about it, and let's talk about how to deal with it. Where we see students that might be leaving the profession before they even get in, like before they even like sit and write their exams. They're like, why would I want to work in a profession where like these people aren't even treating me nicely, or they're rude to me, or they're talking down to me? Why would I continue with being a nurse? And I think that's also a problem too, if we're starting to see attrition even at the nursing school level. And I'm sure there's probably some studies out there that talk about why nurses might be leaving the profession before they even get in.
This just feeds into the bigger issue of nursing shortage, because we know that the population is aging, and we know that we're not prepared to deal with that. But at the same time, what you're saying is some people getting into the profession or trying to are backing out, and that's really not good for our future.
No, it's not. Especially like you said, like we have a huge aging population that's coming up, and with the baby boomers getting older, and I think our system won't be sustainable. Like I look at some of the numbers in terms of at the ED departments, and hearing a lot about like hallway medicine and patients waiting. Like I think if at that university college level we're not turning out enough nurses, or and I guess this is definitely another topic, talking about just funding in general of our hospital systems and FTEs that are available. Like I think it's just a huge cyclical problem that if we don't start fixing and internalizing some of the issues that are happening in nursing, that we'll see that, it will eventually really start affecting patient care.
Right.
But there's the other thing with just speaking about like lateral nursing violence, there's lots of theories in terms of why it actually exists and why it's so ubiquitous. And I think one of the first things that we can all just say right off the hop is there's a lot of women in nursing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a woman hater. I guess I would be considered like a classical type of feminist or moderate type of feminist, but women can be such evil bitches to other women. It's just unreal how we can treat each other. And it's even back to like where you were saying, Sarah, talking about like bullying. They talk a lot about bullying on the school playground, and it could be that same person who was a child bully that turns into an adult. But when it comes to like women on women violence, I don't know if it's because women tend to be trying to one up each other in terms of that weird hierarchy. I don't know. I just find my interaction with women nurses are much different than male nurses. But women can just be very nasty.
I am so glad you said that, because you just addressed the elephant in the room. I had been wanting to say that this whole time, but I actually wasn't sure how you felt about it. But I do feel like that strongly, because In every other situation I've been in. So, for example, right now I work in a more mixed gender environment. I don't have any of these issues with gossiping or backstabbing or, passive aggressiveness. And I just can't help but wonder if it's because of this gender balance. Like, there's just more men that I work with now.
Honestly, it's like a breath of fresh air, Sarah. Like, I too now have a little bit more of that balance with different genders, and it's like night and day. It's just like the tension in the room is, and the flow in the room is completely different. Like, nobody's trying to one up each other. We all, like, yes, I still have other women that I'm working with, but I just find that the almost just the whole air of the room is different. And I just don't know what it is. Why? And I think it's just like women tend to be, and this is where I guess even like when I was in high school, I tended to gravitate towards more of my male partners because I guess I was more like-minded, more like a male, where I wasn't this like passive aggressive or, talk behind this person's back, smile in their face, where I'd be the type of person that's like, oh, you want to talk shit? I'm going to punch you in the face, as opposed to just talking shit about you. That's how I'd rather solve the problem. Where women nowadays are like, oh, I'm going to go on social media, I'm going to say all this nasty shit about you, or I'm going to talk about, have these cliques in the nursing whatever and talk about you that way. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Here's a classic example of what happens. So let's say you, Amy, did something that I didn't like, or you left me with a patient that you didn't really finish your care on. I would then go behind your back and talk about this with every other single person on the team except for you. And then, because women don't keep secrets very well, someone would then tell you that I was talking shit about you behind your back. And that's how you would find out about it. And you and I would just never have this conversation face to face.
So we would continue going on our shifts, working together, but there's that underlying tension. Oh, why did she not do that blood sugar that was due on the hour? And she transferred the patient so the patient was supposed to be here at 12 and she transferred her at 11:58 just not to do that blood sugar. Really? That's probably not the reason I didn't do the blood sugar and not the reason I transferred the patient at 11:58. Like, it's not like we don't have other things that are doing. And the thing is, if you have a problem, just ask. Just say something. I think it would take the wind out of someone's sails if you're like, hey, why didn't you do that blood sugar? And they might actually give you the genuine answer as to why they didn't do it, instead of being like assuming, because that's what happens, right? You're assuming that this person has like a maladaptive response, or they're trying to get out to get you. It's so weird, Sarah. It just boggles my brain.
And I think we just have to just take a step back and realize a lot of this time it's not personal. So maybe the blood sugar wasn't done because that patient or that nurse had two other patients that she had to do more pressing tasks on, and that's why it wasn't done. But a conversation that might have occurred, if this was like, say, a male nurse to a male nurse, is like, hey, could you do that blood sugar before you go? And he might say, sorry, I've got two other patients waiting for me on the unit. I can't do it right now. Okay, done. Yeah. Then they both walk away.
And they would never think anything of it ever again. But for us, it's like we just latch on to this, oh my gosh, she did this, and I can't believe it. Or, you know what? I'm busy too. Or I didn't have a break either. Yeah, everyone is fucking busy. Just help one another out. Really, it's just about being kind to one another. Like, people just need to get off their high horses. Don't get me started, Sarah. But yeah, like, so the elephant in the room is there's way too much estrogen happening. We need to have more males in nursing. Please bring out the testosterone. Let's level up and bring some more men into this profession. What do you think?
Yeah, and I have to say, there was a speaker that came to my workplace not too long ago that talked about diversity in the workplace, and he himself is he has cerebral palsy, so he interacts very frequently with healthcare providers. He has his own PSWs, and he just talked about the importance of diversity, of having a diverse team so that you can see each other's blind spots, and maybe having more male nurses, they'd be able to connect more with male patients and understand some of the issues that they have related to their care, understanding what they need to do. Right. So just saying.
I think the other thing that we've noticed too with men in nursing is I find that they tend to excel much quicker. And I bet you.
Oh, I mean, that's another topic.
Yeah, I know it's another topic, but I bet you it's because instead of clawing at each other's back and stepping on each other with their high heels or their like clogged nursing shoes to get past each other, they probably help each other out. And I think we just need to do a lot more of helping each other out. Why don't you want to see that new upcoming grad or that new nurse or that student excel? Why not? Like for me, it's just like, let me give you all the tools you need so you can do better than I can. Like to me, I'm just like, I'm so happy and so proud to see someone doing well. I would never want to put anybody down, and it makes no sense to me. It just doesn't jive with my brain, I guess.
Yeah, and I have to say, there are a lot of awesome nurses out there, especially senior nurses that mentored me when I was, new to my career. And that's probably why I stayed in some of the jobs longer than others, was because I felt that supportive environment. And I looked at them and thought, you've been a nurse for 40 years and you are not crabby. So it is possible to not be crabby.
Absolutely. So our next series in this podcast talking about nurse on nurse crime, we'll be talking about our own experiences. So we really want you guys to come back, listen again. We're really going to get into the nitty gritty, I guess, and really share our own experiences with lateral nursing violence, bullying, and or harassment.
So I think we're just going to, wrap up this portion of our podcast. Just wanted to remind you guys that we are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we are coming out very soon with a YouTube account. So if you like what you see, please like, share, and follow, and we will talk to you soon.